So, my guest today is Darlena Moore. Darlena is someone who took her experience as a child, one that involved extreme poverty, abandonment, violence, neglect, and decided to help improve the lives of other children that were in her situation, foster children. After much soul searching, she created a nonprofit scholarship fund that specifically helps children in the foster care system pay for college in North Carolina. Initially, she funded it by making homemade granola until she could get donors to buy into her idea. To date, the organization has awarded 78 scholarships to the tune of $121,000. Darlena, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, I want to go into all of this because it's really your personal story is really powerful, and of course, what you're doing now is really powerful for children. But I'd first like to just talk about your connection to the North Carolina mountains because you are from there, you have family and friends from there. Talk to us about what what they're telling you right now.
Yeah, I mean, this Western North Carolina is where my life began and where the Gilbert Scholarship began. And I grew up there and raised, my children there. So it's been very heartbreaking to see everything that's been going on. Just been trying to locate people, and we're finally through the trauma of trying to locate people. That was really difficult. And just trying to help from afar and stay out of the way. I think that's been really difficult because I want to go there. We also well, it took like 3 days to find my brother, for example, so that was difficult. And so we've been.
And that was lack of cell service because of the storm, correct?
Absolutely. Like, he was in his condo with cars crushed around him and trees, and then, no cell service, so no way to call people. Um, so yeah, that part was very scary. We spent 2 days trying to help a friend find water in the beginning. And then we've been doing things like, at first we sent batteries and cash because everything was running on cash. And then we have an apartment there we've offered to a nurse who's going to go there and try to help out. And now I'm going to start baking some granola and sending it. So, we've connected some people also that couldn't find each other. So that's been nice. And we'll probably go and visit in November. But we wanted to give them some time to.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much help right after an emergency, and obviously, we're talking about Hurricane Helene and it's what it did to the North Carolina mountains. And so they're going to need help for months, for years. And it's
That's right.
important that people are willing to keep going and not just do it right away in the height of the emergency. What are some of the things that your friends and family have told you about what they saw, what they experienced, what they witnessed?
I mean, everything from, you know, a friend's husband was trapped in a parking lot and couldn't get out of his car and had to walk home through the woods. She couldn't find him. The only way she could communicate with him was through a sister in South Carolina, just because the cell phone system was so bad. Another friend told me her son saw a body floating down the river. I mean, just terrible, absolute devastation. And it's just been really heartbreaking to see it, but also heartening to see all the help that's coming in, all the people who love the mountains so much, and all the, love for each other um, that we're witnessing now.
Yeah, and I mean, people here in North Carolina, we know how beautiful these areas are, these towns are, and most of us have vacationed there if we don't have other connections. So it's heartbreaking for everyone. And I think it's really important that we continue keeping the awareness on it because this is not a recovery that's going to take weeks. This is months and years.
That's right. I mean, we were there in July for a month, and that beautiful River Arts District where we bought art and taken friends, and we've eaten down there, and we bike around the river, every day. I mean, so much of that will never, maybe never be the same. And so, yeah, it's going to be a long time.
Absolutely. What do you want people to know who are listening to this show who may be not as familiar with this area or and maybe from other states, watching Milton, for example, in Florida, which obviously there are victims there from 2 storms now, but, kind of keeping the focus for us on North Carolina.
Just, you know, understand that, like you said, it's going to take a long time. But Western North Carolinians are extremely resilient people. They're creative people. Um, they have a lot of love for each other. And, I used to work for Meals on Wheels and the Literacy Council there. And the volunteers, that were at one organization were at the other organization. I mean, it's just a community of love, and they will get through it.
And, this dovetails perfectly into your story because you're a helper. You've always been a helper, and that has been shaped by your life experience. I don't usually spend a whole lot of time on people's childhood, but I think in your case, this story of what you experienced is what shaped you and what sent you in this direction. So, as much as you're comfortable with, if you could talk about your early years, I know they were rough, and especially once your mom passed with 5 children, everybody being separated.
That's right. Well, like you said, I was born very poor, and my mother was a single mother of really, she had 6 children, but I had a brother who passed away from an accident at 10 years old. And so there were 5 of us, and she worked in a parachute factory to put food on the table. And at 11 years old, I came home from church choir practice one day, just, ready to see my mom and my siblings. And the house was empty. She had been taken to the hospital. Um, and I never saw her again. She was diagnosed with leukemia, and they took her to Baptist Hospital in, I think, Winston-Salem. And that was it. I mean, I never saw her. My siblings were all split up and sent in different directions by the court. And I ended up at a relative's house. And that was a rough experience for 4 years. Um, and so um,
There were a lot of people in that house. You described it as what, 10 people in a very small house?
that's right. There are people, and my grandmother had a lot of children. So these were mainly adult children and their children, that were in and out of the house. And um,
And this is in what town? This is the North Carolina mountains,
this was
correct?
in Asheville, yeah.
And I know you described some of the things, but what were some of the things in that house that you experienced that you knew, okay, this I've got to get away?
Yeah. Well, there was violence in the house. There were different levels of abuse. There were, um, there was alcoholism. And I just wanted to go to school. Like, I was a good kid. I was in the honor society. I was in cheerleading. Ran track. I was in gymnastics, and school was a refuge for me. And I think, um, I just felt like I didn't belong there. I felt like there was something else. And so I had the experience, one day where my grandmother took her people and left me there. And at that time, she decided to come back. Um, an uncle had picked me up, and she decided to come back and get me. And I ran out the bathroom window. Um,
How old were you?
I was 14 in middle school.
And you just knew that this was not a good situation. I mean, this was not going to go well for you,
That's right.
and you had dreams, and you wanted to be a regular kid, it sounds like.
Yeah. And, you know, I think I was told back then that running away was a crime. And so I ran up the street. It was March. It was a very frigid day. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. I ran up the street to a friend's house, and her mother hid me in the floorboard of the car and took me to the police station because I don't think she knew what to do with me. And um, the police station took me to the juvenile evaluation center where I stayed for a week. So it was almost like, I mean, they locked me up there with,
It was almost like you were being blamed. You're the child, and you're
right,
being blamed for this unsafe, unhealthy living situation. And
right.
so, after this, I guess you went into the foster care system.
Yes, I did. First, I had several placements. There was a PE teacher at school that took me in, and then I think she tried to mold me into the daughter she wanted, and I stayed there for a little bit, and then a friend on the cheerleading teams, my parents took me in, and they were wonderful, and then I stayed with them for a little while, and then I ended up at the home of Dick and Mary Gilbert, which was actually not supposed to be a permanent placement. It was an emergency shelter for older children in foster care.
But you ended up staying there
I did.
until you went to college.
Yes,
So, they pretty much, I guess, became your surrogate parents.
they did. They did. I mean, I think they, saw that I had not spent years in the system and that you know, I was a happy kid. I wanted to do well.
You had potential.
I had
You had
potential.
potential.
Yeah.
So, talk to me about what did they do right that helped steer you in the direction of college? Because that's a big deal. I was looking at your stats. A lot of foster children do not end up going to college.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the first thing they did when we came in the house is they told us there were two rules, and one of the rules was um, you can't hurt yourself or anybody else. And the second rule was you have to go to school or you have to go to work. And those seemed like such easy rules for me after everything I had been through. I was like, I can do that. And also, I found out later that they didn't ask for the kids' records. Like, they didn't read about your past before they brought you in. They didn't want you to come in with a molded view of who
With a
you were.
preconceived notion,
Yeah,
yeah, they wanted to get to know you first, which is really incredible
yeah.
because this would have been what decade would this have been for
The
you?
70s.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that's a big deal. I mean, that was a
yeah,
different time.
yeah.
And so somehow you ended up staying, you ended up thriving, and then how did college get on your radar?
Well, as I said, I always did well in school, and I was always very involved in extracurricular activities, and had a lot of friends. And I think that, you know, Dick and Mary saw that I had potential to go to college. And so they helped me fill out applications and apply for grants, and that's how it happened.
And I love when they took you to college. I think it was Dick who basically told you, you know, "You belong here."
That's
I mean,
right.
because there was this feeling for you about, "Maybe I'm not quite out for this." All these kids, you know, you're at a private school, all these kids whose parents were paying for college, and here you were coming from a totally different background. What was that like? I mean, how did that assimilation go?
I think, I got along well with others, so that part was good. But I think inside I was very lonely and very out of place. I mean, this was a school of higher economic girls, were debutantes, and I didn't even know what a debutante was. So there was an adjustment, but I think the beautiful thing was I figured out at that time that it doesn't matter how much money you have, that people still have trauma and they still have pain and they can still be unhappy. Um, so So yeah, I was at Meredith for 2 years, and then I transferred back home to UNC Asheville, and that's where I actually graduated.
So, talk about your career journey after that. I mean, you kind of against the odds were able to get an education, have somewhat of a normal life after you got to the Gilberts. What happened after college? I mean, how did you decide which direction to go in career-wise?
Um, I majored in communications at UNC Asheville, and the director of communications department there was Kathy Mitchell, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner. So I got a very good education there, and went to Ohio with my husband. I actually got married at 23 to my husband Sam, and he had gone to UNCA as well. And so we went to Ohio, and I got a job as a writer for a department store, F&R Lazarus in Ohio. That was my first job. And I basically had a career in marketing and writing after that. Um,
So how did you at what point did it start percolating in your brain, "Okay, I wanna do something for foster children because I know what that system was like, and I wanna help."
I did do work for kids when I was in marketing. I did pro bono work for like the Department of Social Services. I was a guardian ad litem in Asheville for 6 years. So I always wanted to help youth from foster care. But I think the real light bulb moment was as my career was winding down and I went to volunteer for an organization at Wake Technical College in Raleigh called Fostering Bright Futures. And there was a program there that sort of nurtured all aspects of these youth from foster care, all the things that keep them from being able to stay in college. And it still exists. And I became a mentor to a couple of students and was doing volunteer work there. And, over time, I really never talked much about my experience. I kept it very private. It's not something I volunteered at a party. So,
Right, right.
but that experience of working with those students at that age really, sparked something in me and made me feel like I needed to do more. And so that's how I started cooking the granola and
So
creating that first
yeah,
scholarship.
what's the name of the granola?
It
Is
was
it
called Mountain Girl Granola.
Mountain Girl granola? And this is you make this at home?
I made it at home. Yes, I made it um, out of my kitchen at first. I got a licensed kitchen and cooked it and then sold bags of it and was able to give my first scholarship in 2016 to a youth from the Fostering Bright Futures program at
By
Wake
selling the granola?
by selling the granola.
That's pretty amazing. Is there some special ingredient in this granola? I mean
People loved it. People loved it.
yeah.
I mean, I'm from Asheville and we love our granola. So,
Oh, yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and, you know, I mean, I don't know that there was a special ingredient in it. I think it just was really good. And it had a lot of like whole nuts and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
think it was more, people love the idea of buying something
It helps.
that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was looking at the information about foster care that you put in, the background information for the show. I mean, it's pretty staggering. 438,000 children in foster care in the US. Half of them will experience homelessness, a quarter of them will have interaction with the criminal justice system, and just 3% will go to college. I mean, that is just such a fraction of this group of children. So, eventually you're able to get donors, right? And you call it the Gilbert Scholarship, which I love. Are the Gilberts still alive? I mean, are they aware that you named this after them?
Yes, I stay in very close touch with them. They're still in the mountains, and they are quite older now. They're in their 90s, so they're in failing health. But they were just such amazing people. And actually, they ran a restaurant in Asheville called the Stone Soup, and the youth in the house worked at that restaurant, and the restaurant supported the house. So they were very creative in the way that they supported the children in the house as well.
They've gotta be very honored that you named this scholarship after them.
I think they are. I think they're really proud and really happy, and um,
It's quite a legacy.
yeah,
So you now have this organization, the Gilbert Scholarship, and you are raising money the traditional way by getting, you know, people, I'm sure you do fundraisers, but also just getting people to donate. Talk about some of the success stories you've had with these students where you've been able to give them scholarships.
well, one of the cool things about the scholarship is we don't just give one scholarship. If a student applies the next year, they can be eligible for a scholarship as well. And so we have one student, for example, who is that we've given 2 or 3 scholarships to, who is a pediatric nurse at Johns Hopkins.
Wow.
Yeah, we have marine biologists, we have social workers, we have welders, we have, IT people. I mean, it's amazing if you offer a little power and a little help to them. The tools that they come with are actually can be used for greater good. And they're stronger than a lot of kids their own age.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I think, I'm a mom of 20 somethings, and I think there is this constant struggle in our culture today to make sure that kids are confident, responsible, capable,
Right,
because there's been a lot more helicopter parenting, a lot more nurturing maybe than I know. I also grew up in the 70s, and I wasn't in foster care,
right.
but, my parents were pretty much hands off. And so I think that those children probably have a tougher exterior and maybe are more resilient, I guess,
They
given what they've
really,
been through.
they really do. And they're very smart, and I mean, we have given scholarships to students. I mean, I hate to say this, but who've, lived under a home, lived in cars, you know,
Really rough
youth
situations.
that have, had been sex slaves. I mean, terrible, terrible stuff. And it's just absolutely amazing what they've overcome and how far they can come with a little bit of help.
Do you stay in touch with them to see where they end up? I mean, that's pretty exciting.
I do, some of them. I mean, they're all over the state, but there's a few that stay in touch with me, and I stay in touch as well. I always tell them, I give them my card, and I give them, um, it has all my information. Please stay in touch. And some are better than others at staying in touch.
Now you have children as well,
I do.
correct? And how old are they?
34 and 37, 2
Okay,
girls.
you definitely do not look old enough to have kids in their 30s. Oh
Thank
my gosh.
you. I have
Um,
grandchildren. Yeah,
Oh, good. Congratulations. That's awesome.
thank
But
you.
so do you feel like you parented differently because of your personal experience?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think what I was going to say, about my family and the experience in that house is, they had a lot of trauma and pain as well. And it's kind of interesting how some people will repeat that trauma and some people will be able somehow to choose not to
To
do that.
overcome.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I raised my children very, very differently um, than I was raised.
Yeah, and probably your experiences that you went through informed you in terms of what, really to stay clear of, and maybe even, values to pass on to your kids in terms of how they now are parenting as you're a grandparent. So
Right.
that's pretty incredible. This podcast is about women over 50, and it's about trying to figure out next steps. You talked about your career was winding down, and this is what you decided to put your energy into, something that you're passionate about. A lot of women have a hard time figuring that out. What advice would you give to a woman who says, I just finished a 30-year career and I'm not done yet. I still have a lot to offer, and I'm trying to figure out where to go with that.
Yeah, I had a really hard time with that as well when my career was winding down. You know, my children were starting to get nice careers and their husbands had nice careers. My husband still had a career. And I was like, wait, who am I? So,
Right.
after going through that, I would say, two or three things. The first thing would be, you're enough right now, you know. Um, and the second thing would be to try to just find some stillness and quiet to listen and let the answers come to you rather than trying to force something, because it's really hard not to force something when you have quiet time. And the other thing is, one of the mottos I had was, find what caused you pain in life and try to alleviate that pain for somebody else. And you're not going to go wrong doing that.
That's great. I know one of my guests talked about finding the unsolved problem and trying to fix it. And that's exactly what you're doing. But I like how you defined it with compassion, which is trying to help other people avoid something that was very painful for you. And that's really powerful. What's on your bucket list, Darlena?
Hmm. I think on my bucket list, well, I have some more travel to do. Um,
Don't we all? Don't we
yeah,
all?
yeah, I have some more travel to do. I still want to go to Scotland, where a lot of my relatives are from. I've done some ancestry tracing, and
Oh, great.
yeah, so we did Ireland a couple years ago, and now I want to do Scotland. That's where my mom's side's from.
Nice. And are your grandchildren local? Do you get to see them?
One daughter is local with one grandchild, and she has twins on the way.
Oh, so you're gonna have 3.
And another daughter's in Raleigh with two children. So
So you get to see everybody. Well, that's great.
yeah.
How can people learn more about the Gilbert Scholarship and follow what you're doing?
Well, we're on Instagram at Gilbert Scholarship Inc. And you can go to our website at mountaingirlinitiative.com. And yeah, I mean, all the information is on the website. It shows you
And
the.
I'll put that in the notes too.
Okay.
And how can they find the granola? I mean, I think that's is it
well,
still available?
well, actually, when COVID hit, I lost the kitchen. I was cooking out of
Uh,
Pullen Memorial Baptist Church because it got so big.
you couldn't
And
do it at home.
all of a sudden, I was running a food business and a nonprofit, and neither of which, I had done. And it was just, it's almost like I could have stopped everything and run a food business.
Right, right.
So I did let the granola go. I do cook it on occasion, for people, but I let that piece go. And now I'm just trying to raise funds by getting the story out and making speeches and, just donors and grants.
Right.
It's
Well, thank you for what you're doing for children. I think it's amazing. Education is obviously the number one path to success in life and opening opportunities. So, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you. And I know I will be thinking about you and your friends and family in
Thank
Western
you.
North Carolina as we continue to go through this difficult recovery. So, thank you for sharing your time.
Thank you for having me.